It was one of those quiet, almost magical nights when the world outside seemed to hold its breath and the moon cast long silver shadows across the garden. Inside Grandma's old house, the warm glow of the fireplace danced on the walls, illuminating photographs that had watched over generations. Grandma sat in her rocking chair, knitting needles clicking in a rhythm she had followed for decades. Yet tonight, there was a tremor in her hands and a distant look in her eyes, as if she were seeing something far beyond the room. "I saw him again," she whispered, her voice fragile but urgent. I froze, caught between disbelief and curiosity. "Him?" I asked softly. Her gaze met mine, steady but shimmering with emotion. "Your grandpa. He came back to the house," she said, the words hanging in the air like a fragile promise. The thought seemed impossible. Grandpa had passed away 30 years ago, but the sincerity in her voice, the warmth and recognition in her eyes, made it feel real, terrifyingly real. Shadows flickered across the room as the fireplace crackled, and a faint draft carried the familiar scent of Grandpa's cologne, drifting from somewhere only he could have left it. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, taking in the familiar furniture, the cozy quilts, and the photographs frozen in smiles from decades past. Yet now, each detail seemed different, charged with an unseen presence. Grandma reached out, as if to touch something invisible, and whispered again, "He's just checking on us." The air felt heavier, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Every creak of the wooden floorboards, every flicker of the shadows, made the room feel alive with stories from the past. And I realized, with a shiver running down my spine, that tonight something extraordinary was unfolding, something that would blur the line between memory and reality, between the living and those who had departed, and that I was about to witness it all unfold through Grandma's eyes. The nights after Grandma's first encounter with Grandpa's presence were unlike any I had ever experienced. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the house seemed to awaken in ways that were both subtle and unnerving. Shadows stretched across the walls, longer and darker than they should have been, moving as if guided by an unseen hand. A faint hint of Grandpa's cologne would occasionally drift through the hallways, even though the room had been empty for decades. The old grandfather clock in the living room ticked steadily, yet sometimes the sound felt amplified, echoing through the corridors, as if keeping time not just for the present, but for the past as well. Grandma moved through the house with a calm that belied the extraordinary occurrences, her hand steady on the banister as she glanced at places I could not see, her lips whispering words that were not meant for my ears. "He's just checking on us," she said softly one night, and I realized that what we were witnessing was a delicate balance of memory, love, and something far beyond comprehension. I began to notice the small, inexplicable details almost immediately. A chair slightly out of place would greet us each morning. The faint hum of an old tune, Grandpa's favorite, seemed to emanate from the walls, a whisper that made the hairs on my arms stand. Once, while helping Grandma water the garden, I saw a shadow move across the living room window. Not human, not animal, but something distinctly familiar. When I pointed it out, Grandma only smiled knowingly. "He likes to watch," she murmured. The combination of normalcy and the uncanny made each day feel like walking a tightrope between comfort and fear. The attic became the focal point of our curiosity. The door, ancient and stubborn, seemed to pulse with secrets each time we approached. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, photographs and letters left untouched for decades, and the smell of dust mixed with lavender filled the space. On one particularly quiet night, I climbed the narrow staircase to investigate, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. The floorboards creaked under my weight. the sound louder than it should have been, and as I reached the top, I could swear I saw a faint glow emanating from a corner. A photograph of Grandpa, long ago taken, seemed to tilt slightly toward me, and a soft breeze swept across the room despite the windows being tightly shut. My heart raced. It was as if the house itself were alive, guiding me towards something I was not yet ready to understand. Grandma often encouraged me to trust the process. "She wants us to see," she said, her eyes filled with a quiet reverence. One night she handed me a small photograph of the two of them together, laughing, and whispered, "Look closely. He's telling us a story." I stared at the image, the details now seeming alive. The sparkle in Grandpa's eyes, the curve of his smile, the way his hand rested gently on hers. Shadows seemed to stretch across the photograph, bending almost imperceptibly, as if drawing me into another time. The mixture of warmth and fear made every heartbeat a drum in the silence of the attic. Small, seemingly trivial events also began to occur, each adding a layer to the suspense. The kitchen timer would go off when no one had set it. The rocking chair would sway gently in an empty room. Once a drawer that I knew was empty rattled open, revealing a faded photograph I had never seen before. Grandpa standing beside a young boy I did not recognize, smiling knowingly. I gasped, and Grandma only chuckled softly. He likes to remind us that he's still here. That balance of fear and comfort became the rhythm of our nights. Even humor crept in unexpectedly, breaking the tension just enough to keep us grounded. One night, startled by a loud creak in the hallway, I jumped. Grandma laughed softly. "Relax," she said, shaking her head. "I'm sure he's just checking whether you've been sneaking cookies again." Her laughter, gentle and warm, mixed with the faint hum of the old tune from somewhere unseen. And for a brief moment, the house felt ordinary again. These small breaks in tension made the mystery feel alive rather than oppressive, weaving a delicate dance between suspense and comfort. The attic continued to reveal small clues, almost like breadcrumbs leading us through the labyrinth of memory. A box would be slightly ajar, a photograph turned face down, a letter resting in a place it should not be. Each night, the presence of someone unseen was unmistakable, yet not frightening. An invitation to witness a story paused 30 years ago, now slowly unfolding. Grandma's intuition guided us. "He wants us to understand," she whispered, lifting a delicate envelope with trembling fingers. The air grew warmer as she opened it, and for a moment, time seemed to hold still. The shadows softened, and the faint glow that had always lingered in the corner of the attic brightened subtly, like a signal that the next chapter of the story was ready to reveal itself. Even as the mystery built, the ordinary world continued alongside it. The smell of tea brewing, the crackle of the fireplace, the quiet rustle of Grandma's knitting needles, all juxtaposed against the extraordinary presence in the house. It was in this balance, this delicate interplay of the everyday and the supernatural, that the suspense deepened. Every step in the attic, every glance at a photograph, every whisper of wind felt laden with meaning. The house was alive, not with menace, but with the memory and love of someone who had never truly left. As I stood in the attic that night, flashlight in hand, shadows dancing across the walls, I realized that what we were experiencing was not fear, it was revelation. The mystery was a story, carefully layered with emotion, memory, and unseen presence, guiding us to a moment of understanding. Grandma's calm, unwavering belief in the reality of what she had seen anchored me, allowing curiosity to triumph over dread. The stage was set, the clues laid out meticulously, and the sense of anticipation wrapped around us like a tangible curtain, waiting for the next act to unfold. The nights that followed the attic's mysterious glow brought with them a growing sense of unease. What had begun as subtle hints, the scent of Grandpa's cologne, shadows stretching oddly across the floorboards, now escalated into events impossible to ignore. Objects shifted in ways that defied logic. A chair would be found inches from where it had been placed. Letters would appear atop tables where they had never been before. And the old grandfather clock sometimes chimed at hours that made no sense. Grandma, ever composed, would shake her head gently and murmur, "He's reminding us. He's watching over us." But her voice carried an edge of tension I hadn't noticed before. One evening, I followed her to the attic again. The stairs groaned under our weight, each step echoing through the silent house. Dust motes floated in the pale moonlight streaming through the small window, casting shifting patterns across the walls. Grandma paused at the threshold, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "Tonight, we might finally understand why he's returned," she whispered, her eyes reflecting a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I swallowed nervously and stepped in behind her, flashlight trembling slightly in my grip. The attic felt different now, more charged, as if the air itself were aware of our intrusion. Boxes that had once seemed stationary now appeared displaced, and a stack of old photographs lay scattered across the floor. One image in particular caught my eye: a young grandpa, smiling mischievously beside a familiar yet strangely out-of-place figure of a boy I didn't recognize. As I bent down to examine it, a low creak echoed from the far corner of the attic, and I froze. Grandma's calm voice broke the tension. "He's just letting us know he's near. Don't be afraid." But even as she spoke, I could see the subtle quiver of her hands, the way her fingers clutched her shawl tighter, betraying the unease beneath her composure. The first major sign of rising tension came when a letter, seemingly untouched for decades, floated gently from a box and landed at Grandma's feet. She picked it up with reverent fingers, smoothing the edges before opening it. The envelope bore Grandpa's handwriting, faded yet unmistakable. As she read aloud, the attic seemed to hold its breath. The shadows paused, the air thickened, and even the faint hum of the wind outside seemed to quiet. The letter spoke of unfulfilled promises, secrets kept hidden to protect loved ones, and emotions that had never fully been expressed. Each word seemed to tug at the edges of the room, pulling past and present into a single charged moment. The subtle humor that had once broken the tension appeared unexpectedly. Grandma smiled softly and glanced at me. "I hope he didn't see you trying to sneak an extra cookie last week," she teased lightly, her voice carrying warmth and familiarity. I laughed nervously, and the attic seemed to breathe again, easing just slightly from the thickening tension. Yet, even with this small relief, the presence in the room remained undeniable. Shadows lengthened toward corners where no furniture existed, and a faint, almost imperceptible whisper floated through the rafters, as if Grandpa were guiding us to a revelation he had orchestrated decades ago. It was then that the attic door slammed shut with a loud, startling thud, sending a shiver down my spine. The sudden sound echoed through the house, followed by a series of soft knocks, like someone moving carefully among the boxes. Grandma's face remained calm, but I could see her knuckles whiten around the letter she held. "He's showing us that he's here," she said, her voice steadier than I felt. My flashlight beam caught a corner of the room where a faint glow had begun to form, pulsing gently, rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Every instinct screamed that this was more than memory, more than a trick of the imagination. It was something alive, something intentional. The tension escalated further when I noticed the rocking chair, empty moments before, beginning to sway slowly back and forth, as though inviting someone to sit. Dust lifted in tiny swirls around it, casting the dim light. Grandma approached cautiously, her shadow merging with mine, and as she did, I could feel the air itself vibrating, charged with expectation. It was as though the attic was a stage, and we were finally arriving at the moment Grandpa had prepared for us all these years. A sudden gust of wind blew through the small attic window, scattering loose papers across the floor. Among them was a photograph I had never seen, a younger grandma with grandpa, holding hands and laughing, the sunlight catching in their hair in perfect harmony. It was a picture of joy and love, yet it carried an unspoken urgency, as if reminding us of unfulfilled business, of feelings left unspoken, of truths only now ready to emerge. The attic felt alive, whispering stories we had never fully known, bridging the 30 years that had separated the living from the departed. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the shadows, every breath of wind added to the rising tension. We moved slowly, cautiously, following the glow toward a corner where an old trump lay untouched. The lid, heavy and stubborn, seemed to resist our touch until Grandma placed her hand gently on it. "He wants us to open it together," she whispered. My heart raced as we lifted the lid, revealing letters, keepsakes, and a small folded note that had never been read. The presence was overwhelming now. I could feel a warmth, a comforting energy surrounding us, yet the air was thick with suspense, waiting for the next revelation. As we examined the contents, the attic seemed to pulse with life. Grandpa's handwriting, photos, and objects conveyed his love, humor, and care in ways no words could capture. The subtle humor broke in again. A small folded paper reminded Grandma of a long-forgotten argument about cookies and kitchen chores, and she chuckled softly. "He hasn't lost his sense of humor," she said, shaking her head. Yet beneath the laughter, the tension remained palpable. We were on the brink of understanding, on the edge of revelation, and every sensory detail, the shifting shadows, the soft hum in the rafters, the faint glow, made the rising tension impossible to ignore. Finally, as the attic seemed to hold its breath, we realized that the conflict was not just about seeing Grandpa. It was about confronting decades of memory, regret, and unspoken love. Every object, every photograph, every subtle whisper was part of a story meticulously left for this night. We were participants in a ritual of remembrance, an intimate reunion orchestrated across time, suspended in suspense and emotion. The attic, once merely a dusty room, had transformed into a bridge between past and present, love and memory, life and the unseen. The attic grew still, the air thick with anticipation, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally, while the faint glow that had been pulsing in the corner now intensified, casting a soft, almost ethereal light across the room. Grandma held the letter in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and longing. "He's here. He's really here," she whispered, her voice barely audible but charged with the weight of decades of love and loss. I stood beside her, heart hammering, unsure if I was ready to witness what was about to unfold, yet unable to look away. A sudden creak from the far corner of the attic drew our attention. Slowly, a figure began to materialize from the light itself, a familiar silhouette, gradually becoming more distinct. Grandpa! The man who had been gone for 30 years stood before us, his features unmistakable, yet softer, almost glowing. His eyes held the same warmth they had decades ago, and the faintest hint of a smile tugged at his lips. Grandma gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks, and reached out a hand. "I've missed you so much," she whispered, voice cracking with emotion. The figure did not speak, yet the room was filled with communication. The gentle nod, the subtle movements, the unmistakable presence of love and reassurance. Every detail in the attic seemed to respond to his arrival. Photographs shimmered in the soft glow, letters rustled as if touched by invisible fingers, and the faint scent of his cologne intensified, enveloping us in a comforting familiarity. The rocking chair moved slightly, tilting as though bowing in respect, and shadows danced along the walls in a mesmerizing pattern, echoing the gentle movements of Grandpa's figure. Each pulse of light seemed synchronized with the beating of our hearts, a rhythm connecting past and present, life and memory. Grandma stepped closer, her hand trembling, finally brushing against the intangible form. I could see her inhale deeply, feeling the presence of her lifelong love in a way words could never capture. The letter she held fluttered slightly, as though lifted by a gentle wind, and she realized that every word written decades ago had led to this moment. Every promise, every secret, every expression of love orchestrated to be understood now. The attic, once a place of mystery and suspense, had transformed into a sacred stage, holding the climax of a story paused for 30 years. The glow of Grandpa's figure shifted, illuminating the photographs that had always seemed ordinary. I could see tiny details I had never noticed before. The way his hand rested on Grandma's shoulder in one picture, the mischievous twinkle in his eyes in another, the love captured in moments frozen in time. Each photograph seemed to respond to his presence, vibrating subtly, connecting the objects, the memories, and the emotions into a single tapestry. It was as if he were saying, without words, that he had never truly left, that his love and care had endured, bridging decades, guiding and protecting us. Suddenly, a soft hum filled the attic, almost like Grandpa's laughter echoing through the years. Grandma chuckled softly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "He hasn't lost his sense of humor," she whispered, and for a moment, the tension eased, blending into awe and wonder. Even I couldn't help but smile, though my heart still raced. Shadows played along the walls, flickering in time with the hum, creating patterns that felt alive with memory, presence, and the extraordinary magic of reunion. The climax reached its emotional peak as Grandpa's figure moved slowly toward the small trunk we had opened earlier. He gestured, a subtle nod guiding Grandma to the letters and keepsakes inside. It was then she understood. The purpose of his return was not to frighten or confuse, but to reveal the hidden stories of their shared past, the unspoken words, and the love carefully preserved over decades. Grandma's hands hovered over the objects, and she could feel his presence, encouraging her, comforting her, whispering that it was finally time to acknowledge and embrace these memories. Time was suspended. Every creak, every flicker, every whisper of wind carried weight. The attic was alive, filled with the energy of love long past but enduring, suspense reaching its peak as we collectively held our breath, savoring a moment that had been decades in the making. Grandpa's figure lingered long enough for Grandma to understand the message, to feel closure, to embrace the reunion she had been waiting for her entire life. And then, as gently as he had appeared, the glow began to fade, the shadows softened, and the figure of Grandpa slowly dissolved into the warm light of the attic, leaving behind a tangible sense of peace. Grandma collapsed into her chair, tears streaming, but a smile radiant on her face. The letter, now fully read, felt heavier with meaning, yet lighter with understanding. The attic, once a chamber of mystery and suspense, had become a sanctuary of closure, love, and memory. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the realization wash over us. The suspense had reached its peak, and now the story could settle, allowing us to process the extraordinary encounter. Even as the intensity subsided, small signs of humor and warmth lingered. The letters teased old arguments. The photographs captured playful gestures, and Grandma whispered softly about Grandpa scolding her for leaving the cookies unattended. Each reminder brought laughter alongside tears, blending suspense with lightheartedness, reinforcing that love, while sometimes mysterious, is also tender and human. The climax, though extraordinary, left us grounded. A sense of awe, closure, and understanding wrapped around the attic like a protective veil. Grandpa had returned not to frighten, but to teach, to reconnect, and to leave a lasting impression of enduring love, bridging 30 years in a single unforgettable moment. After the glow of Grandpa's presence slowly faded, the attic settled into a calm, almost sacred silence. The shadows that had danced and stretched so dramatically now softened, draping gently across the walls and floorboards. The air, once thick with anticipation and suspense, now felt warm and comforting, carrying the faint scent of old wood, lavender, and Grandpa's familiar cologne, a gentle reminder that while he had departed, his presence lingered in memory and love. Grandma sat in the rocking chair, the letter cradled delicately in her hands, eyes glistening yet serene, her breath slow and steady. "He's at peace now," she whispered softly, more to herself than to me, and I felt the weight of decades lift from the room. The attic no longer felt like a place of mystery. It had transformed into a sanctuary, a space where memories could live safely and where the extraordinary and the ordinary coexisted seamlessly. Each photograph, letter, and keepsake seemed imbued with new life, a tangible connection to the past. Grandma carefully began arranging the letters and photos, creating small displays where light from the attic window illuminated them. "He wanted us to remember," she said, a soft smile touching her lips, "to see the life we shared, the moments that mattered, and to know that love never really ends." Even in the quiet calm, life's little humor returned to the scene. One photograph showed Grandpa mischievously hiding behind a tree, likely teasing Grandma during a family picnic decades ago. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Some things never change," she said, her voice full of affection. I smiled too, realizing that even in extraordinary encounters, the everyday joys of life, laughter, shared memories, and tender teasing remain vital, grounding us in humanity amidst the mystical events. In the days that followed, the house retained a subtle energy, a gentle awareness that Grandpa's presence had left behind. Objects remained in slightly shifted positions, shadows seemed to linger a moment longer in corners, and the faintest hint of his cologne occasionally drifted past, but these were no longer unsettling. Instead, they felt like gentle reminders, whispers of care from someone who had shaped a lifetime of love. Grandma moved about the house with ease, her movements relaxed and joyful, often glancing at the framed letters and photographs with quiet reverence. The story of that night, though extraordinary, became part of the household's natural rhythm. Our mornings began to include small, comforting rituals inspired by the encounter. Grandma brewed tea, as she always had, but now she occasionally paused to glance at a photograph or letter, murmuring softly, "He'd have liked this." The house felt warmer, more alive, yet serene, a balance between memory and reality, past and present. Even the attic, once a focus of tension and mystery, became a place to revisit stories safely, to laugh at old memories, and to reflect on the enduring power of love. The calm allowed reflection, understanding, and healing. The encounter had resolved more than just the mystery of the glowing figure. It had brought closure to emotions held for decades. Grandma's eyes, once clouded with longing and uncertainty, now shone with contentment and gratitude. The house itself seemed to exhale, letting go of suspense and tension, settling into a rhythm that embraced both memory and present life. Even the subtle creaks of the floorboards, the soft wind through the attic window, and the flickering of the fireplace seemed harmonized with this sense of peace. As we moved through the house together, sharing quiet conversations and laughter, it became clear that the resolution extended beyond the attic. It lived in the kitchen where meals were prepared with love, in the garden where sunlight danced across flowers Grandpa had once tended, and in the quiet corners where memories lingered. The extraordinary moment had returned us to the ordinary world, yet changed it forever. The past and present had intertwined, leaving behind an emotional calm and clarity that only love and memory could achieve. Even humor remained part of the calm. Grandma would joke lightly about Grandpa still checking whether we had been good or naughty, whether the cookies were finished, or whether I had finally fixed the wobbly chair in the living room. These moments of laughter, woven into the serenity, reminded us that life continues, carrying both love and lightheartedness alongside mystery and reflection. The resolution was complete. Suspense had given way to understanding, fear had transformed into comfort, and mystery had revealed itself as love preserved through time. The house, once a stage for the extraordinary, was now a home filled with memory, peace, and subtle reminders of a presence that transcended the limits of life. Grandma rocked in her chair, the letter gently folded in her hands, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the window where the last rays of the sun lingered. Everything was calm, balanced, and whole. The story of Grandma seeing Grandpa 30 years after he passed carries a lesson that reaches beyond the attic, beyond shadows and glowing figures, into the very essence of love and memory. It reminds us that true connections never truly end. The bonds we share with those we love continue to shape our lives even when they are no longer physically present. Life may separate us. Time may drift past, but the impact of care, kindness, and shared moments endures, quietly guiding us in unexpected ways. Grandma's experience shows the courage it takes to embrace the unknown and to honor memories without fear. Sometimes the past returns not to haunt us, but to teach, to comfort, and to remind us of the significance of love, family, and understanding. It also illustrates the importance of paying attention to the little details, of noticing the signs and whispers of those who shaped our lives, and of celebrating the humor and warmth that make those relationships unique. In every creak, in every shadow, in every faint whisper of memory, there is a message. Love transcends time. Patience reveals hidden truths. And the heart always recognizes what the mind might struggle to understand. It's a gentle nudge to cherish what we have, honor those we have lost, and embrace both the mystery and the joy woven into life's tapestry.
Have you ever felt the presence of someone you loved even after they were gone? Maybe a familiar scent, a fleeting shadow, or a memory that suddenly feels alive. Grandma's story reminds us that love doesn't disappear with time or distance. It lingers in small moments, in quiet gestures, in the spaces we least expect. Take a moment to think about the people who shaped your life. How do they continue to guide you, even when they are no longer physically present? What signs of their care and love have you noticed, and how can you honor them today? Even in the midst of suspense and mystery, life has its lighter moments. Grandma would chuckle softly, teasing me about sneaking extra cookies when she wasn't looking, joking that Grandpa probably came back just to catch me in the act. Once a photo fell off a shelf and she laughed, saying, "See, he's still playful, making sure we don't take life too seriously." Even during tense attic moments, the tiny creak of a floorboard or the gentle sway of a chair became reasons for soft laughter. These light touches reminded us that love carries joy alongside mystery, keeping the heart warm. To create the perfect mood for this story, keep the lighting soft and shadowed, letting corners of the room remain slightly dim to enhance suspense. Use gentle ambient sounds, the creak of floorboards, soft wind through windows, the subtle hum of a distant tune, or the occasional crackle of the fireplace. Shadows should dance naturally, and warm glows from lamps or candles can highlight photographs or letters. Maintain a calm, reflective tone in narration, allowing pauses for dramatic effect. Light humor or smiles can break tension, balancing mystery with warmth, ensuring the atmosphere remains spooky yet comforting. As the night drew to a close, the house settled into a quiet peace, the kind that comes after extraordinary events leave their mark. Grandma sat in her favorite chair, the letter clutched gently in her hands, her eyes reflecting decades of memories, love, and the astonishing encounter she had just experienced. Outside, the moon cast a gentle glow across the garden, and the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying the faint scent of flowers Grandpa had tended so many years ago. The house, once alive with suspense and mystery, now exhaled in calm, as though sharing in our relief and gratitude. We walked through each room together, noticing small signs of Grandpa's presence that had always been there, yet now felt comforting rather than eerie. Shadows that had danced across the walls now seemed gentle, almost protective, and photographs glowed softly in the warm light. Laughter echoed lightly as Grandma teased me again about sneaking cookies, reminding me that joy and love remain even amidst the extraordinary. Each room was a testament to life, memory, and the enduring bonds of family. In that quiet, reflective space, I realized that stories like this are about more than mystery. They are about connection, understanding, and embracing both the extraordinary and the ordinary in our lives. Grandpa's visit reminded us that love transcends time, memory shapes the present, and courage comes from opening our hearts to the unknown. We closed the attic door one last time, leaving the past and present intertwined, carrying lessons, laughter, and love forward. And as the house settled into its nightly rhythm, I knew this story, with all its suspense, humor, and heart, would linger in our minds forever, a gentle reminder that some bonds are too strong to ever fade, and some stories too precious to ever end.
If you think you could handle this mystery, hit like and subscribe. Share your theory in the comments. What do you think was inside the box? Don't miss our next story. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more secrets uncovered.